Hello. No, settle down. Settle down. Hello, everyone. Hello. It's so good to be with you. I have been very much looking forward to this and have been resting a lot this week to make sure that I had the energy to come forward and offer whatever it is that I offer in this space because I do love to do this. I love to show up here, but like anything else, if your energy tank is empty, if your gas tank is empty, it's virtually impossible to even be present within the things that you love. Scooby, you're going to have to settle down. Thank you. Stella, would you get up here? So, yeah, I have taken the liberty of providing myself with some notes that I made to help myself ground within this very dominant Pisces energy that we are currently in right now, which is really a beautiful thing. It really is a gift. This season of the sun in Pisces, Mercury in Pisces. And so today we are going to talk about this Pisces Virgo axis and specifically the Virgo full moon, which is coming up on March 18th, and Mercury being in Pisces, which started yesterday and will last for about 20 days, I want to say. Are the dates for when Mercury will be in Pisces. It's a very, very brief run of Mercury through Pisces. So not a very long transit at all, but a very profound one, especially if we open to it intentionally. So that's kind of our roadmap for today. And I say roadmap because I have literally put together pages and pages and pages of notes to help guide myself through these energies. And yeah, with that said, I am going to get right into it. If you find value here, always feel free to give this video a like. It does help boost it on YouTube. Also, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and click the bell if you want to be notified of my videos and postings and whatnot. I am just as a little bit of an update for those of you that are regulars on my channel, I am cruising along in my grocery training module project, the what I'm pulling myself out of owning authenticity a little bit to have the energy and the creative capacity to build these training modules. Right now, I've worked to where I'm like a week and a half ahead of schedule. So that just means hopefully that I'll finish early. And that's amazing because it's still been incredibly effortless and easy and fun. So, yeah. So that's good news. So that is cruising right along. And as soon as that project is wrapped up, which is looking like May-ish, I'll be back full force on my Owning Authenticity channel and videos and everything else. But yeah, what's been coming to the surface for me in this rest phase that I've been in feels like it's been really, really clarified for me these last few days, looking at um, the Virgo Pisces axis and thinking about these energies and what what are the opportunities inside of these energies. Yes, it's very different from how I normally feel, but everything in the cycle of life has its purpose. So what is the purpose? I love understanding that, and it always for me makes it a lot easier to feel grounded and secure even when you feel very different than you normally do. So some key themes that I pulled out of like this Pisces Virgo, Mercury and Pisces, full moon in Virgo, the themes that are going to be coming up with all of this energy, a lot around self-judgment and perfectionistic tendencies. So we also have the South Node transiting through Scorpio right now, and that is scheduled to bring up basically all of our shadows that we're carrying, that South Node purging through Scorpio, bringing those shadows to the surface. again, we can look at it like it's happening to us, like it's a bad thing, or we can look at it like what's the opportunity here? Because when those things bubble to the surface, we can see them more clearly. We can look at them from the height of evolution that we've reached today, not the old self where the wounding originally occurred. We've grown and we have new tools and new awarenesses that can really help ourselves to feel better inside those moments where our shadow does bubble to the surface. And so I feel like with this axis being highlighted, that Scorpio South node bringing the shadows to the surface, so much of it is around this self-judgment piece. And that's definitely part of this space, this energetic space where I've been the last couple of weeks, is being really hard on myself and feeling my energy lower, and like really feeling my consciousness kind of recede inwardly and into the depths of my being, which then I'm not really able to show up in the way that I quote unquote normally do. And it's pulled up a lot of self-judgment. And so that is an opportunity if we look at it like that, where we look at it like this is something that I can sort out from a new vantage point, understand it in a new way, which lets us move on then to the next level of our healing journey. And the Pisces Virgo axis is commonly called the health axis. And I also like to think about it as the healing axis, which is very similar and yet to me feels a little bit different. Um, where Virgo is the physical end and Pisces is more the spirit, emotional side, and how those two connect to create a healthy being is really a magical alchemy that comes together inside each of us individually. It looks different for each of us individually in terms of like, what do we need to be doing in our physical world, in our spiritual inner world, to feel healthy, to be healthy and thriving. So that's a lot of what we're going to talk about in these pages of notes that I have here. Um, with Virgo especially, there is what Stephen Forrest refers to as divine discontent. So this almost constant discontent, almost constant not good enough, not perfect enough, not quite there yet. There's always potential for more that you can sense. And in the sensing of the potential for more, you're never there yet. And so there's this chronic discontent. And so chronic discontent is kind of like the vibrational undertone of that word chronic kind of leads you down the path of like physical illness is where that eventually goes. If you treat it as divine discontent and let the sensing of potential guide you forward, let it orient you forward on your path. Like, I'm sensing perfection and I want to move in that direction. And then at the same time, simultaneously accepting yourself as you are. This highest level of Virgo, this highest frequency of Virgo is radical self-acceptance, because you can dragons now. You can sometimes her little foot slips and she can't jump as good as she means to. I totally get it. It happens. Radical self-acceptance. Like, even when you try really hard and you don't jump as good as you mean to, like how well can you forgive yourself is a really, like, not a question that needs an answer at any moment, but it's a good one for contemplation, and probably something that is coming to the surface at this time. That self-judgment rising to the surface is ultimately an opportunity to check in with yourself and how good are you at forgiving and soothing yourself, and how good is your radical self-acceptance. And again, no judgment in any of that. It's just for contemplation, for letting this idea of eternal evolution, which is really what Virgo is. It's just constant improvement, is this idea of perfection that exists in the future that we'll never really get to, but we strive for it, strive for it, strive for it. So like the highest frequency of Virgo is where we grow as a soul in the earth realm. And that's really beautiful, necessary, all of those things. It's awesome. But the lower frequency of Virgo can definitely beat up on itself a lot for not yet being at that level of perfection or being at the fully sensed potential. Um, being discontent in that gap. And so working towards the higher frequencies of Virgo is in that self-acceptance piece of where you are right now, which helps you to be okay even in the fact that there's a gap. Yes, of course, you want to be better, you want to be further along, whether we're talking about like tasks that you need to do today, or you're trying to heal your physical body, you're trying to create something meaningful in the physical, like there's always somewhere that you can imagine that you want to be that's further down the road from where you are. And this axis of health overall, like when you really zoom out to the health perspective, like it's really about how comfortable are you with that gap? How comfortable are you being imperfect? Like Stephen Forrest in his books, I kept this really simple. I went with Stephen Forrest's Book of Earth and Book of Water to like really look at this from an archetypal perspective of Pisces, Virgo, Moon, Mercury. Um, I think that's been part of my fatigue with these is like I was trying to do 3 transits. I cut this one down to 2, and I'm trying to take in so much information and like give you guys everything because that's just how much I care. And it's not sustainable. So, you got to like just do what's fun and call it good. So that's what I did. And I'm feeling pretty good about it so far. So this divine discontent piece, it is actually like the carrot that like gets you to move forward. And that moving forward puts you up onto your divine path, your path of divine service, the soul growth that you're being intended when it came here. So being able to sense potential, that's a gift, like heavy Virgo energy where you're perfectionistic or you're critical or whatever it is, that's really a sensing of potential, sensing of we could do more, we could be better. And that is a gift to our community, to our society. Like there's so much loving energy that comes through wanting to help yourself and others grow. So again, all about perspective. And then at this time, with all this Pisces energy, and especially the Mercury in Pisces, which is going to be conjuncting Jupiter and opposite this full moon, um, there is huge potential over these next few weeks for big, original, inventive, creative thinking to let big, original, inventive, innovative things like into your brain space. And we're going to talk more in the Mercury and Pisces section about how these energies actually help that to be true. But just know that it is like that's what we have in front of us is this huge opportunity for radical self-acceptance, getting on the path of our divine service. And what was the last one? Oh, and this big original thinking is really like to say that the stage upon which you imagine what does your divine service look like just got bigger and more expansive and more infinite and more interconnected with the all and with spirit, and that it exists outside of time. Like when I say that, I think of Nostradamus, who existed in like the 1500s, I think, and he left prophecies in his time. He wrote them down as quatrains, which is like a fancy kind of a poem, I think. And he encoded them in poetry, in symbolism, so that in his time they wouldn't be able to understand what he was talking about, that he was writing them for a more advanced version of our civilization. And Dolores Cannon, she went back in time through a hypnotized subject and had conversations with Nostradamus from his time in the 1500s, connected with her time in the 1980s. And together they had conversations where they decoded all of his quatrains and basically like it all laid out like side by side with history. Like he predicted some of the worst world events that we've ever experienced, were in his predictions. And so it's like that. It's like, are you are you needing to this big original creative thinking? It's like, how big can you dream? You know, he's over there creating something that isn't even going to be a thing for 500 years. He knows that he's not going to live to see the value come out of this, and he made it anyway. He spent hours and days and months and years in meditation, apparently communicating with Dolores Cannon. You know, like nobody knew that at the time, but like I'm guessing he did. I don't know. You know, this is all coming from Dolores Cannon's books, by the way. So there's Nostradamus, or Conversations with Nostradamus, I think is what it's called. And then there's like book 1, 2, and 3, because there's like 1,500 of these quatrains. So yeah, Nostradamus's North Node was in Pisces, by the way, as is mine, which I was like, whoa, that's very interesting. And this thought of big, creative, original thinking, he conceived of something that existed outside of time. Like, especially in the 1500s, think about how, I mean, at that time, the reason he had to encode it was because of the Spanish Inquisition or something like that, and that basically he would be killed for talking like this and thinking like this. And that's how society responded to this kind of thought back then. And yet this is still what he devoted his life to creating. So all rules are off, all bets are off. Like that's how I interpret that, is like it can be anything. It can be so much bigger than you can even comprehend from your physical. Like Pisces it's a water sign, so like it's definitely more felt than it is understood logically. And when we get to the Mercury and Pisces section, we'll see a little bit more how that plays out. But yeah, so a very exciting month of March. I'm definitely enjoying it. I Through studying these Pisces Virgo archetypes, though, I've definitely reoriented myself within it. And while my energy levels are still very low and I'm still a little out of sorts, quote unquote, compared to normal functioning, I am embracing it and getting more out of it thanks to accepting it. And I was able to do that because I understand it better. So that's what we'll spend the rest of our time doing. So I have a little roadmap here for myself because, okay, so we're going to start with the full moon in Virgo, which is happening at 27 degrees on March 18th. And we know exactly where and when the full moon is because it's when the moon is exactly opposite the sun. When it's as far away from the sun as it can possibly be, AKA it's 180 degrees away. It's at that midpoint, and that is when the moon is at its brightest because it's as far away from the sun as it can possibly be. And the full moon is typically talked about as a time of manifestation, and new moons, like the beginning of where the sun and the moon come together, where they're at the same exact point in the sky, they are thought of as a time of new beginnings and new intentions and planting seeds. And that then on the full moon, things are illuminated and everything is brighter in a new way, and you're manifesting new things into your world. And one quick note on this, and this is very much just how I look at it, so I'll throw it out there in case it's helpful, is, you know, I've seen some people work with the full moon in a way that I personally like don't really resonate with this. Is that like I'm going to try to manifest something on the full moon, like, oh, it's a full moon, it's a good time for manifestation, so I'm going to try really hard to like manifest this particular specific thing. And I don't I don't think it's like that personally. I look at it more like this full moon, this period of illumination is a time where I personally am going to witness a new manifestation in my life or some type of manifestation coming into my life. So there's very little effort at a full moon, I think. I think it's more like a window that gets opened or a spotlight that gets shined on something that was basically already there. It was already in the works because at a new moon is where we would set intentions, we plant seeds, we launch rockets of desire, we wish for things, we, put our energy out into the world and let the universe deal with it. And the universe does deal with it and delivers manifestations of those new moon intentions on the full moon. So this March 18th full moon that we're having, it's more like nothing really to do unless you do have full moon rituals that feel heart-centered and good for you and they're supportive for you. Then, I mean, by all means, that's the entirety of spirituality, is to find stuff like that and do it until it stops working. And, but I do also want to put this in there that, like, what you're going to manifest on the full moon is already in motion. It's already a thing. It's already done. It's coming whether you are doing whatever you're doing or not. And what you're doing, your ritual around the full moon, is to get yourself to be as open and naked even as you possibly can. And I don't just mean physically naked. I mean not guarded at all. Let the universe dump a full moon manifestation on you in all its glory, and let yourself be open to receiving that. So if your full moon ritual is a bath with candles because that's how you relax and that's how you open up to your own well-being and to trusting in the universe, then that's a beautiful ritual. That's doing what it needs to do to open you up to what the universe is trying to deliver. So a subtle distinction as far as, like, where is the action in this process? I personally think it's way more at the new moon than it is at the full moon. So first, I am going to go through, let's see, I even counted out pages for myself. Turn 2 pages. Okay, Carly. This is so much love went into preparing this for right now me, and I'm just like really grateful to 3 hours ago me for putting it together. So yeah, that's really nice. So yes, Stephen Forrest, Book of Water, he goes through the 3 water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, and inside of each of those chapters, he goes through their ruling planets and the houses that they are associated with. So that's why the moon is covered in the Book of Water, because it rules Cancer and is associated with the 4th house. Cancer, being of the water family, is the first step of healing. And that's really what the water family is for, is healing and regeneration. That's what emotions are for, healing and regeneration. So they very much serve a divine purpose in our journey here. And Cancer is the first of the water signs. So it goes Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces are the 3 water signs. And he says a lot in the book overall that healing begins with feeling. So we cannot heal what we cannot feel. And that's where Cancer is very much the beginning of, a lot of times Cancer is associated with our home. Like, it's even represented by the crab who carries its home with it on its back so that it can retreat into its home, into safety at any time that it needs to. And home is more a frequency than it is to do with a physical thing. Home is a place where we feel safe. And really, we feel safe enough to feel our feelings. That's where home is. And that's going to make me cry. Most people on this planet don't have a home. Most people on this planet are homeless, I would say, because most people on this planet are not feeling safe to feel their real feelings. And that's really the heroism of Cancer. And whether you have heavy Cancer placements in your chart or not, we all have a moon. We all have the moon in some sign in our chart. And depending on which sign and house and the aspects of your moon, that's saying a lot about how you feel, how your emotional body is wired. And he gave some examples here of, like, basically it's how you see the world. Like, your emotional body dictates your mood over a lifetime. So, like, everybody has highs and lows that they manifest in their emotional body. We all go through that, ups and downs. But if you were to smooth out the ups and downs and just create an average, your moon sign is your average emotional mood over the course of your lifetime. It's also your attitude. And so he's like, that's a little different, a little the same as mood, but like attitude is more your that's where the moon is often your world ruler. Like it's your inner emotionalist self and, your most uh, like the part of yourself that you keep behind the most walls and that kind of thing. But the way we feel and our emotional body, it leaks out of us through our attitude. So somebody who is depressed at home, when they go home, they just fall apart and they cry and they can't get out of bed and they can't take care of themselves or their home. And that's how they're living at home. When they go to work, their mood is felt, their attitude is felt. And even if you paste on a happy face, anyone who is even a little bit empathic is feeling the truth behind the pasted on happy face. And so that's where like our attitude is how our mood, our inner world leaks out into the outer world with us without us ever saying a word. Our attitudes kind of speak for itself. He said your attitude flavors your actions. And so he also went so far as to say, like, when we look at the world and we are looking at like what is reality, what's going on in the world, um, he said so much of what we see in the world is just a reflection of your attitude. So if you have a Capricorn moon, for example, you see the world as a list of tasks that need to be completed, a list of work that needs to be done, some responsibilities that you need to handle, compared to if you have a Leo moon, you may look at the world as all the different opportunities for fun. You look at the world and you see love. You look at the world and you have such an immersion in your own self desire that you see opportunities for how you might go about meeting your own self desire. So you see how, like, the Capricorn moon and the Leo moon, they see the world completely differently. If they were in the same room at the same moment, experiencing the same thing, and then you ask them afterwards what just happened here, you would hear two completely different stories. Now, does that mean that two different things happened? Not really. It means that we each see the world very differently, and part of that lens that colors how we see the world is our moon sign. I would take it one step further to say, really, all of our placements kind of color this filter through which we see the world and how we understand things. It's not just the moon, but the moon is a huge one. The moon is our emotional body, and that's a big piece of that. Ooh, this part was really interesting. So he talked about how um, the moon is associated with the mother, and that basically it's not that your moon sign says who your mother is. Because think about, like, I have three brothers and we have four different moon signs. So does that mean that we had four different moms? No, we had the same mom. So how does that make sense? Well, he says that it is how you experienced your mom. It was your experience of your mom. And so then you look at, like, oh, okay, so, my moon sign, I experienced her this way compared to all these other moon signs. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially going back to what we just talked about with your moon sign colors how you see the world. And our mom is basically our first manifestation. She's our entry point into this world, literally. She's a doorway. And we come through her, and she is typically our welcome wagon on the other side as well. So again, she is one of our very first manifestations. Our dad too, but not nearly as much as our mother. And that manifestation, like, begins this moon sign, how you see the world, like how she treated you, how she was. He said in the book that we, like, when you have multiple siblings with different moon signs, that, like, they had the same mom, but they had different experiences of the mom. And I personally think it does go a little further than that to where you really do have a different mom. Like, I think me as the oldest child, where my mom is pregnant and she didn't have any other kids, and then she gave birth to me, and again, she didn't have any other kids, and a couple months later, she was pregnant, so there was that. But then, like, being pregnant with my next brother, that mom had a baby that she was trying to care for, and imagine, like, the emotional energy that you're putting into this new baby when you have a teeny baby over here. Not near as much. This brother is an Aquarius moon, and I'm a Leo moon. So, like, that, I'm kind of processing this out loud as we go, but, like, it's such a fun example of, like, I think even within the same family, each sibling kind of has its own mom. And so that's why you have different siblings with different moon signs and the same mom providing a very different experience to each child. He also gave the example, let's say your mom was very Cancerian herself, and she was very nurturing, very loving, very hands-on, very involved. And the Cancer moon child might have really, really appreciated that and felt like my mom is nurturing and my mom loves me and very caring for me. And then you have an Aries moon child who feels like, literally, get the F off me. Like, you're smothering me. I had a smothering mom, same person, different kid. And so there's so much richness when we think about our mom and this very first manifestation that we have in this life. But I really liked that differentiation as far as, like, your moon doesn't represent your mom, it represents your experience of your mom. I think that's a helpful distance to put in there. So as we age, this mothering association with the moon, um, it does tell us how we experienced being mothered as a child. And then it also talks about how, as we age, how we begin to mother ourselves and others. And that's where, men, women, we all have a moon. So we all have this mothering, nurturing side to our personality. And that's why there are some men who make better mothers than some women. Like, if a woman, for example, has her moon in a masculine sign, so an air or a fire sign, with maybe hard aspects, like maybe it's right next to Chiron, something like that, that's pushing them away from their moon, they're just not connected to their feelings, and nurturing will be a lot harder. Versus a man with a Pisces moon and soft, gentle, supportive aspects will be an excellent nurturer. So mothering, like, it has nothing to do with our gender. So he gave an example, though, as far as, like, our mothering style, it begins with ourselves and then it extends to other people. So imagine you wake up in the morning with a sore throat, and let's say you have a very nurturing moon. You have a nice, gentle, soft relationship with your moon. And that means that first, you're very gentle with yourself, meaning, I don't feel well today. I don't feel 100%. So I'm going to take the day and I'm going to rest and I'm going to recover and I'm going to get back to 100%. You're gentle on yourself, and you call your boss and you say, hey, I'm not coming in. I don't feel good and I don't want to get everybody else sick. So look at, you were gentle with yourself. You're gentle with everyone else because you're protecting them from catching what you have and experiencing illness. So there's a gentleness that expands when you give it to yourself. It automatically applies to everybody else. Compared to if you wake up in the morning with a sore throat and you have a difficult relationship with your moon, or you're closed off from your moon, or whatever the case, then you say, get up and get your ass out of bed and get going. We got to get to work, and got to make the money, got to do the things. Work needs to be done. World doesn't stop for you. Come on, like, get to it. And you force yourself to go to work. Now, 3 days later, you're sicker than ever because you didn't stop to rest when it was just a little sore throat. And 5 of your coworkers now have caught and are at home with what you had. So you being harder on yourself actually extends to making life harder on everybody else around you. So that's an eye opener for me personally, because I think a lot of times I can be hard on myself. I can push myself when I need to. And again, I think, that's a tool like anything else. There's nothing wrong with that inherently, it's neutral. But when we abuse it, when we push ourselves over and over and over again, that's not being gentle with us. That's not nurturing ourselves and caring for ourselves and honoring whatever our emotional body is telling us. And I mean, the shamanic viewpoint of illness is always that there's something energetically that's going on, and that's why physical illness is manifesting. So if we push through physical illness, I mean, we're already pushing through the energetic stage, and now the physical stage is manifesting. And if you push through that, a more severe physical manifestation will come until you are forced to stop. So being gentle on ourselves and stopping when we are having a choice to stop, I think it makes good sense. So things to explore as far as like your unique moon sign, what sign that's in, what house it's in, what aspects is it making. Some of us have easier access to our moon than others. If you want to go deeper, which into the moon, I mean, I feel like any of these any of these archetypes are a million miles deep, maybe more than that. And so, he talked for maybe, well, I listened to an audiobook, so it was maybe 25 minutes worth of content on the moon. And then he's like, well, and if you want more, I have The Book of the Moon by Stephen Forrest. So I haven't read that one, but I put it on my list. So last thing I'll say from this part is he went through the 8 phases of the moon and kind of the characteristics of each phase. And that's really helpful, and I feel that kind of planting a seed inside my own curiosity around becoming more aware of this moon phase, both inside the person's natal chart, like what moon phase were you born under, because then you're basically carrying the essence of that energy your whole life. And all the time, we're in one of these moon phases. Mostly, we're only calling attention to the new moon and the full moon, but every single 50 degrees or so is a new phase of the moon. So, very fascinating, and something that I am really only just coming to as far as like paying attention to it with any real consistency. But the full moon, here's just some keywords of what he talked about. So, caregiving/nurturing. And again, going back to kind of the mothering archetype, that makes sense that you would have on the full moon a manifestation of nurturing of some sort, either towards yourself or others. Another reason why rituals like baths and nice things for yourself can be really healing at that time. It's a time of creating art. So maybe that's the manifestation, is your feelings bubble up in a way where they are so obvious and so easy to express and communicate. So you create an art piece that reflects that. Um, the embodiment of light and dark. He kind of talks through this as far as like if you're born during the darker half of the moon, that you carry that energy of being a more inwardly oriented person and more inside your inner world. And it makes you mysterious and more contemplative. And then if you're born in the brighter half of the moon, that it is making you more outward, more oriented on relationships and other people and the collective creation, like working together with other people. And so every 29 days, it's going all the way around. So, like, we're constantly moving between the dark half of the moon, the inner, and the quiet, the contemplative, the feeling space, pure feeling on the inside. You don't have to do anything with it. It can exist purely in your feeling space, which is so easy. But then again, I was born during the darker half of the moon. Um, so then, like compared to then half the month, we're in the brighter half where we want to come out and we want to shine a little bit brighter. We want to express our emotions a little bit more freely. So we're constantly going around and around and around. And the manifestation in the full moon, it naturally embodies the light and the dark, meaning without the dark, you don't get to the light. Like if you don't go through the dark part, the new moon part, where the moon is basically obliterated because it's so close to the sun, so it doesn't show up in the sky at all. At that time, there's a wishing, there's a wanting for something, there's a setting of an intention. And then at the full moon, at the bright side, we may manifest a step along the path for that intention. Like, that's the other thing, is a lot of times I think people think of manifestations as like the end all be all. And more often than not, your manifestation is one step in the unfolding along the path. Like, you want to be a published author. So maybe on the full moon, you get an email from a publisher who wants to see a sample of your book or something like that. Like, it's a step along the way. So there's also a piece of that that lets us be open to whatever's ready to present itself, like whichever stage of my journey I'm on right now, whatever step I'm ready to live for my highest good and the highest good of the all. We will all be manifesting that on the full moon. And some people, I think, cut themselves off from being able to see it because they're expecting something bigger or more close to the full finished product versus just one of the steps along the way. Okay. I think that's it. Okay, so there's that piece of the moon. And so now I want to go through Virgo. And Virgo is one of my faves, which is interesting because my south node is there. And it definitely did not start off as one of my faves. It started off as one of the, like, oh my God, why did I do this? 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, Virgo. Okay. You guys are quiet today, but that's cool. You're here. You're taking it all in, possibly. Oh, yes. Okay, so Virgo. Stephen Forrest in the Book of Earth would be this one. Virgo is one of the earth signs, along with Taurus and Capricorn. And Virgo is where, I think, especially when we look at it in terms of it's the sister sign to Pisces, I see it as like this place, this axis is the place where our spirit, Pisces, meets our body, Virgo, and they come together to create our overall health, like we talked about. And so the Virgo side of it is connected to spirit. It's very aware of potential, like we talked about, but really when you break down like what is potential, it's the ability to see something that doesn't exist yet. It's the ability to sense the perfect form of whatever it is that you're trying to create or work on or you're witnessing or whatever. And he's like, blink, 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 like blink, your eyes closed, inside your mind, you're seeing the perfect form inside your mind. Like, that's just how your mind is wired. When you have any kind of heavy Virgo energy, is like you have this picture of perfection inside your brain. And then you open your eyes and you see the form that isn't perfect. It never will be, never can be. As soon as you manifest your ideal of perfection in the physical, looking at that, you will naturally, in your brain, now see the next level of improvement. So it is literally one of those horizons that you just never really get to. And so that's where that idea of divine discontent comes from, and being able to recognize that when we feel dissatisfied, either that we're not good enough or what we're doing isn't good enough, or more often I catch myself in the anxiety and the worry that I'm not ready or I'm not going to do good enough or I don't know enough yet or whatever it is. And like that puts this weight on my shoulders that then makes it not fun. And usually for me, because I'm a Leo moon, Virgo South Node, like I'll wake up in the middle of all of that going, wait, why isn't this fun? Like, I want to have fun. Like, I like everything to be fun. So what the hell's going on here? And it's that I'm putting the pressure on myself to be perfect in the physical form instead of letting the perfection orient me towards what do I want to achieve in the future, and then employing that radical acceptance to accept whatever version of the form I am in this moment. He says perfect is the enemy of good enough. And that can be the shadow of Virgo, is that in that perfectionism, you get stuck, you get stranded, and then you don't create things that are of service to human beings, which is the highest frequency of Virgo. What they really want at their core is to be of service to other human beings in a way that truly matters to them. So when you're held back by, I'm not perfect enough yet, you will literally never get to be of service. And Virgos simply can't live with that. And that's what drives the process of evolution, to learn how to radically accept yourself, because that's the only way you get to be of divine service, is if you move forward and start before you're ready, before you're perfect, because that's as good as it ever gets. He says, like, instead of judging yourself based on perfection or not, that you're more looking to judge yourself by the intensity of your effort. So how hard did I try? How much of my heart did I put forward into this? And Virgo is a very honest mind, a very aware mind. And if you're half-assing something and at the end it turns out like shit, and then you're beating up on yourself, yeah, Virgo's pissed, because Virgo knows you didn't put your whole heart into it. And at the highest frequency of Virgo, it's not about being perfect, it's about putting your whole heart into it. And if you can't put your whole heart into it, then why are you even doing it in the first place? And so this is where, like, a good practical example is like what I talked about with this session of, like, it was really starting to feel heavy of 3 transits and trying to do them each, like each energy that just serves. Um, it was just such a high bar that I had set for myself, and I felt like I wasn't living up to it. And for a second, I'm beating up on myself. And then I realized, like, I think that bar might be a little high. I think, and so that can be something that happens in Virgo, is that you set your standard on perfection, and then you forget in the living out of the thing that, like, perfection isn't ever actually going to happen. So you have to grade on a curve when it actually comes time to, like, assess the physical manifestation of what happened. Yeah, radical self-acceptance. He says warts and all so many times in the book. And even just the word warts, I feel like I don't know if this comes from being a child and, like, being read fairy tales with, like, witches and their warts, and they were so, like, gross and demonized and blah blah blah. So, like, even just the connotation, even just the vibration around the word warts. So when you say warts and all, it's like, ooh, no, no, not warts. Yeah, yeah, warts and all. Radical self-acceptance includes warts and all. Hmm. Interesting. That reminds me of a meditation I listened to the other day by Jeff Foster, who I'm brand new to listening to, and I found him through this meditation, but it was called, like, Blessing the Mess. And he says in the meditation, like, when you catch yourself not allowing, allow the not allowing. Allow the not allowing, allow the resistance, allow the, don't fight any of it. Let it just be there. Allow the not allowing. I thought that was like the same of warts and all. Like, you're not perfect and you have to accept yourself anyway. Like, this is the connection between health and this view of ourselves that is constantly comparing the perfect and the actual, the perfect and the actual, the perfect and the actual. You flash back and forth. And that, when you are not in the higher frequency, that it is painful to see how far apart the perfect and the actual can be at times. And that pain, that suffering is what hopefully opens us up to the higher frequencies of Virgo, where we realize that there's only so much I can do. I am just one human being, and there's only so much I can do in the physical with these 2 hands, with this time that I have in the day, these hours that I'm awake. There's only so much I can do. There's a very real limitation of this physical world. And letting that be there and not judging yourself for not being able to get it perfect, like, that for me has been a softening that's happened my whole life. And these last couple weeks, like, in this heavy Pisces energy, there's been a deepening of that self-acceptance of, there's a reason to every season that we walk through. So rather than fighting against, this is hard, or this isn't how it normally is, or this isn't, I don't know how to function like this because this isn't my normal place, that's all, blinking and seeing the perfect, and opening and seeing this isn't how it normally is. Like, I don't know what to do with this, rather than just relaxing and allowing the not allowing the gap to just be there, just observing it, just letting it be part of that. In my mind, in my spirit, in my unrestricted state, it looks like this. But then in the physical, when you have to add in all the physical restrictions, it looks like this. And to be okay with that. And I would say a week ago, I was struggling with that. I was not accepting. I was a lot more than I am now, thrashing around a little bit. And it makes it so much harder than it needs to be. And it's that thrashing around, that not accepting the gap that leads to illness, I think. And I think that's why Virgo represents health, because when we are a perfectionist and we don't let ourselves really exist in the physical body, basically what we're doing is like sending a subliminal message to our body that you suck. You're not good enough. I don't like you. You're not doing it right. You're failing. You're blah, 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 blah. And that is corroding your physical vessel into physical illness eventually. And yeah, self-acceptance goes a long way, I think, towards physical healing. So does this part of Virgo. And I love that even more than health, Stephen Forrest focuses on the servant archetype of Virgo. And when we hear the word servant, the connotation or the vibration around that is that it's low man on the totem pole, basically. But that is not at all what Virgo actually represents in terms of the word servant. It's more of the vibration of a skilled craftsperson. So you are of service because in your village, you are the one person who knows how to do X. You're the shoe repair person. You're the one who shoes the horses. You're the one who blah, 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 blah. Like that's your skill. That's your trade. That's your craft. And when someone in the village needs that, they come to you. So I think of my dad when I think of Virgo. He has his sun and a couple other planets in Virgo. And he is an entrepreneur. And so he owns his own business. He's his own boss. And I would say he very much embodies this archetype of the servant. He is a milk equipment repairman. So that means that he also designs and installs parlors, but then he also maintains them afterwards and like does all the maintenance and stuff on the equipment. So dairy farmers, they milk their cows 2 to 3 times a day. And if they have their equipment break down, they need someone to come right now and fix it right now because they can't miss milkings. They're trying to still keep their cows regular. If you start missing milkings, the cow's production goes down. So it's costing you money the longer and longer you're offline. So my dad growing up, I mean, this is my model for what it looks like to be an entrepreneur, is that you are a slave essentially to your service that you're providing. Like he took it upon himself to be responsible for this whole sales territory of like, he's basically the only person in this geographic area who does what he does. And even beyond that, the type of work he did when I was smaller, where he was designing and installing parlors, that type of work was even more specialized. And he would go outside the country to do that sometimes. So it's like that. It's like they come to you from far and wide. You are not a servant low man on the totem pole. You are highly skilled in something that takes maybe even a lifetime to learn how to do. It's not something that you're going to be born with. Like Virgo specifically is an earth sign, and it is things that you learn, like technical skills that take time to build the layers of the technical skills that you have. So with this skill that you have in Virgo that others find useful, as you develop that skill and as you offer that skill to the world, and as others affirm back to you that this is helpful, useful, whatever, there is a transformation that happens where your own self-doubt is transformed into self-respect. So self-respect comes from having a skill and developing it and knowing that it's valuable in the world and having confidence in this skill, in this value that you're able to provide. And if you have any Virgo planets, then you have a skill inside of you like this, that is something that you are uniquely talented and capable of building inside of yourself through deliberate, consistent effort, learning more and more and more and more, and building up this skill set that others will seek you out from all over the world because of the craft, the service that you're able to provide. It's unlike anyone else in the world. So that is a whole different way of looking at the servant. And so let's see, where am I at? Stick with my notes here. Otherwise, who knows where we'll end up. Ooh, this was a nice little prayer that he shared in there, that, dear God, please grant that today I do work that matters. So again, this is where the Virgo self-respect comes from. And when we talk about self-respect, we really are talking about Virgo. So if that's something that, you feel like a self-loathing, or like I'm not good enough, or I don't know where I fit in the world, or what's my purpose, what's my place, Virgo can be a very healing energy to look towards, as far as we're going to talk a little bit more when we get to this next page about Virgo also represents students and teachers. So Virgo is where we humble ourselves, we take our ego and we check it at the door, and we go to class and we listen to the teacher and we absorb what they have to say. Nobody says that we have to do it exactly how they're telling us to do it, but we do take the time to absorb what they have to say. And then from there, we think critically about what we've learned, and we either iterate or we keep it the same. We keep what works, we get rid of what doesn't work, we make it better, we add our own sauce. And that's that Virgo energy. Like, it starts with learning. It starts with a teacher or a mentor of some kind, is typically how you're going to find your way into your skill, whatever that looks like. Is that there will be somebody there to teach you, and they'll pass their knowledge on to you, and you'll learn, you'll transform from the student into the teacher. And then Virgo continues, the life cycle of Virgo continues, where now you're the teacher and now you teach someone else. You pass your skills forward. It talks about honoring the flame, that this lineage of the flame is a sacred contract, that within these skills, like I think about, my dad and his business, like he in high school worked for a couple different dairy farmers, helping them milk their cows. So he wasn't doing equipment repair specifically. He was in the dairy barns around the process and around the whole thing. And out of it, he figured out that, hey, I have a talent for the mechanical side and like fixing the motors and the pumps and all that fun stuff when it breaks down. And so he learned, because the farmers were there, they knew kind of how to fix stuff, and they would call repair guys and he would watch what they do, and they knew how to fix stuff. And same thing, continuing as he went, he worked with other guys that were basically doing what he was doing, but he learned something different from each of them and continued to add to his skill set. And now 40 years later, he's got a very valuable skill set that people still call from all over the world just to hear his advice over the phone. And so this is Virgo. It's very, very valuable skills. They matter. They are things that the community actually needs. So this is something that, yes, you're doing it for yourself. You're developing this skill set for yourself because it's going to give you that self-respect, and it's going to let you find your place in the world. And that's really satisfying and can help on the health front as well. Having that sense of like, I'm valuable because of this. I matter because of this. People seek me out for my assistance because I'm able to provide this service. If you have a healthy sense of that, chances are your physical body is a lot healthier also. So when it comes to this teacher-student concept, and this is something that, like, as a Virgo South Node, and I have that Virgo South Node squaring my Gemini and opposite my Pisces. My Mars in Pisces is opposite my Virgo South Node. And so all of that combined, I feel like I pop in and out of this, where it says, like, when it comes to this idea of teacher student and lineage and learning from someone else, um, that there are two ways to approach it, either through ego or through love. And if you're approaching it through ego, then there is an underlying self-doubt that basically doesn't let you open up and hear what the teacher has to say. So that self-doubt that says, I should already know how to do this, basically. I should already be perfect. And I'm not, and I don't want them to know that. So I can't say I don't know. I'm just gonna like push this teacher away. And so when we're in the ego space and the self-doubt space, we can turn away from the very teacher who can teach us the skill that can give us the self-respect to overcome the self-doubt. So that's kind of like a road sign, if you will. Like, it's going to happen. You're going to catch yourself in ego pushing away from people who, like, you have whatever story about why I don't want to listen to them. And if you really sit with that and you sit with your aversion to them, self doubt is probably lurking in there somewhere. So, food for thought on that front. And then if you're coming to lineage from the love side, you basically love yourself enough to accept where you are right now. You accept that I'm a beginner. I'm a newbie. I'm a noob on purpose. I'm coming to this open slate and open mind. Teach me. Teach me. You know, I'm going to absorb it all. And then I'm going to take it forward and I'm going to keep some of it and I'm going to let some of it go and I'm going to enhance some of it and I'm going to take it down roads that you never thought to take it. And I'm going to do my own thing. And then at the end of all of that, I'm going to teach my way, my distillation of all of this knowledge. I'm going to pass that forward onto my student. That's what they'll receive. They won't receive the same teaching that I received. They'll receive my version. So this lineage is a beautiful picture when you think about this flame. I see videos on YouTube all the time about like how this woman kept her family's 500-year-old candle making tradition alive, or like, you know, this city's like 2,000-year-old history of the tulips, or whatever it is, that like there's this lineage and there's this humility that Virgo possesses. And really, I think Virgo Pisces both have this beautiful ability in their high frequencies to set their ego aside and to come to it from a place of, I want to be of divine service. How do I get there? And how you get there is to leave your ego set aside long enough to learn from master, who can greatly accelerate how quickly you get up to speed with what is your divine service. What skill are you meant to provide? Because if it's as valuable as, you know, Virgo is predicting that it will be, it'll take you decades to build. So it's also the humility to wrap your mind around that like it'll take me decades to be a master at this. And I'm okay with that. I'm still going to start with day one. You know, day one, lesson one, teach me some stuff. So yeah, with the love and the self-acceptance, it makes it possible to turn towards your teacher. And then also makes it possible at the end, because you think about this and think about like, I have this skill that's so valuable. It's possible to get into the ego side on the teacher's front as well, that says, you know, this valuable skill, it's mine. And if I teach it to other people, then, you know, people all over the world will call them instead of me. So I have to keep this skill to myself. I can't teach it to anybody else. That is definitely the ego self-doubt side of the teacher half of the Virgo archetype, in that, you know, if that knowledge dies with you, if you don't ever teach anybody else how to do what you're doing with this skill and it dies with you, that is not divine service to the collective. You know, so if you're in it for love of the all, you would want to teach the next generation of students and pay that knowledge forward for the good of the collective. These notes, again, 3 hours ago, me did such a nice job making these notes. Okay, so now the moon in Virgo is basically a summary of Virgo itself, because when you have the moon in a sign, it's like an emotional need to do whatever that sign archetype is. So when you have the moon in Virgo, whether this is in your natal chart, so like you have this energy all the time, or right now we have the full moon in Virgo coming up on March 18th. So we'll all have the moon in Virgo for 2.5 days. And we'll all go through this energy. We all go through this energy every single month for a couple of days, where this kind of comes to the surface, where our evolutionary goal is to be able to provide meaningful service to others. Also, like Virgo is the sixth zodiac sign. So, like if you picture the wheel, where Aries is number one, on around to Virgo is number six, on around to Pisces is the 12th sign. So, Virgo is the last zodiac sign on the bottom half of the wheel. And kind of like the symbolism for the moon, like the bottom half of the wheel symbolizes our inner self, our inner world, our inner contemplation, our relationship between us and ourselves. And then when you transition into the top half of the wheel, zodiac signs 7 through 12, that is more our relationship with other people. And so Virgo, the sixth sign, is where we have a handover from our inner selves to our relationship with the outer world. So Virgo is where we do begin to take off our ego and who are we and what is our main concern and how do I provide the greatest service to the world around me. And that's like another, typically when I see Moon in Virgo or Pisces for that matter, or really heavy Virgo Pisces energy ever, I always like to have a conversation around self-care because with both of them, there is such an orientation towards being of service, which again, the beauty of what you're able to do with that energy is to take your ego and put it to the side and be of service. Burnout, though, is so freaking common with this axis of like, I want to be of service. And then you take it to the extreme. You run your car out of gas and now you're stranded in the middle of the world, like in the middle of nowhere, and you're not being of service to anyone. So that seems to be a cycle that people with heavy energy on this axis can fall into. Um, and so with Moon in Virgo and with the full moon in Virgo, there is such a marrying of everything that we've learned up to this point through the evolution that happens like through each zodiac sign. So like, zodiac signs 1 through 6, Aries through Virgo, we have this established sense of ourselves and this transition point of now us with the outside world. It's like rather than taking your ego and setting it to the side or taking yourself and setting it to the side, yourself has to be still at the forefront. But in the higher frequencies of Virgo, I think it becomes easier to accept your own physical limitations, accept that I'm going to be of service as much as I possibly can. And when my gas tank hits a quarter tank, I know that I got to go home. I got to leave. And if there's still people that need serving, that need something from me, then, if they're willing to wait until tomorrow, I'll be back tomorrow. But there's like an honoring of your own personal physical limits that happens in those highest frequencies of Virgo that I think like as we think about health and this full moon in Virgo, definitely health is one of the topics that comes to mind. It's like, how does health actually manifest, or really how does a lack of health manifest? And I think it comes back to not honoring these physical limits and pushing ourselves to do more and to be more and to more strive unconditionally towards this sense of perfection versus letting it orient us and knowing when we need to stop and rest and care for ourselves so that we can care for others. So also highlighted with this full moon in Virgo is your own sense of self-dignity, your own sense of self-respect. And so not that there's right or wrong in this, but it is a time where those feelings towards yourself could be highlighted. So something to keep in mind is if you're feeling really good about yourself, like really milk that for all it's worth as far as listing, why am I valuable? What skills and services do I provide in this world that are valuable to other people? Like really spend some time with that list and write it down and really pat yourself on the back. And like that's only going to add momentum to your self-respect, which the trickle down effect of that, the better self-respect you have, the better you're going to honor your personal boundaries, your physical boundaries, the better you're going to manage your energy levels, and the more uptime you're going to create for yourself to be of service to other people. And if it's not so good, like if you're feeling lost or like you don't have a place or you don't know what your value comes from or whatever, then maybe the manifestation that's coming is a teacher. that resonates, like a teacher that you can listen to and soak up what they have to say. Humble yourself at their classroom, even if that's a YouTube video or whatever, in person, someone you've never met before, it doesn't really matter. Humble yourself to say, I'm going to accept myself as a student. Like I don't have to beat up on myself because I'm not a master. I can accept myself as a student and I can find a teacher and I can start moving forward in this day by day, step by step, decade by decade transformation of becoming the teacher. Like I feel like there's a lot of times that I catch myself trying to be perfect, and all it does is hold me back from getting better. So the highest frequency of this Virgo is the continuous self-improvement, again, always oriented towards that symbol of perfection that we can imagine in our brains. And again, this time of the full moon in Virgo could greatly highlight for our own recognition, like just so that we can see it better about ourselves. It'll highlight, what are your skills? So if you have a pretty good idea, like you're sitting there and you're thinking like, you got some things coming to mind, like one, I would say write those down. That would be amazing. And probably there's a lot more where those few ideas came from. But if you're drawing a blank, like that would be a great way to open towards this Virgo full moon, in terms of saying like, the manifestation that I would really love to see, if this is what's for my highest good at this time, I would love to get a clearer vision of what are my skills in this life, And typically our skills are things that they're natural talents that we already possess, and we put time into learning the technical to do around them. But your natural talent is already there. So really, like if you're sitting there thinking, I don't know what my skills are, it's not that you don't have them. You definitely do. It's just a matter of becoming aware of them. And awareness is manifesting all the time, So maybe on this full moon next week, the manifestation that's coming is a new awareness about how valuable your skills really are, or what that list of skills even looks like. And with the full moon in Virgo, that moon in Virgo in general, the sense of happiness and contentment that comes in that energy is by doing work that matters. So again, if you're feeling discontent, lost, like you don't have a place where you can ground in and do work that matters, it could be a little bit of an emotional time for this full moon in Virgo. But hopefully on the other side of that emotion, or within it, is this added clarity around like, what unique skills and services are you here to offer? So that you can judge yourself, not by being perfect, but by being heart-led, by putting your whole heart into it, by communicating things because or doing things, Virgo, providing your skill, providing your service because you know that it matters. You know that it's important that you show up in the world and do your work. So you do it, and you do it with a full heart, and you love what you do. And that is intoxicating. And if you're working like that on a daily basis, putting your whole heart into whatever you're doing, recognizing your physical limits and going home at whenever you need to, and resting, and getting back to 100% so that you can go again and provide more divine service in this world. But again, like it's all about how we look at it. And I have done a lot of work with my Virgo South node to look at Virgo as this gift, as far as like being able to, we can either be a victim of our high standards, or we can be inspired by our high standards. And the difference between those two is really just a tweaking of our own perception. So that is something that I have worked on a lot within myself. And these last, like, really, while all this energy is here in Pisces, I feel like this is already kind of coming to the surface. And I'm expecting a manifestation of clarity on the Virgo full moon around this service that I'm promoting, in this heart-centered sense of giving and being of service that guides me to do this work that I'm doing. And I have a sense of it, but I'm only just coming to it. I've mentioned I'm only 18, 19 months into studying astrology, so I feel like a brand new beginner still a lot of the times. And that's part of what I have to do through this session of humbling myself of like, you know, I think for a little while I was coming in here like I'm a professional astrologer and let me tell you all the things about all the things. And that was really, really psyching me out because I'm not a professional astrologer and I don't know all the things about all the things. So there was a deepening of my own self-acceptance around where I am right now with the level of knowledge and opening towards, of course, I'm going to continue to learn and work towards someday mastering this knowledge. They say to master something, it takes 10,000 hours. And I did the math one time on like my morning time, my self care, because I do like I mean, depends on the day. On the low side, I would say my self-care at this point is like an hour. On the high side, some days I get in there and it just like goes and goes and goes and goes several hours. And so I even did like, okay, 2 hours on average every day. And if, I've been doing this for almost 6 years. So like, how many hours is that? It's only like 3,000 hours. I'm like, wow, like, see, I'm not even close to a master at any of this. Like at most I am like a little bit along in my studies, and I'm wanting to still move forward. And when I start to get hard on myself about needing to know more than I do right now, it's like that gap that I'm sensing between where I am and where this perfect level that I want to be at, and letting that beat me up instead of being inspired to continue to learn, continue to move forward, continue to find more teachers, new teachers to teach me new things that click in new ways and I have new understandings. Like the only way that you build skill is one step at a time, 1 minute at a time, one moment of focused effort at a time. And if you love what you're doing, investing that time and effort isn't difficult. It's fun and it draws you, it calls your soul. And that that is the kind of thing that I'm thinking is probably going to manifest around this Virgo full moon, is like each of us getting a deeper sense of what is that soul level calling of the divine service that we came here to provide. Because whether you have heavy Virgo energy or no planets or points there at all, we all have Virgo in us somewhere. We all have this desire to be of service. And there's so much to do with our own personal health and well being that has to do with us finding that path of service in this world. So much easier to be healthy once you're on your path of service, giving to others the things that only you are uniquely and divinely talented to give. And that's not to be a head trip or an ego trip. We all have that, like we all have this divine skill that we came forward to cultivate. And so I get to be a brilliant creative genius at mine, and you get to be a brilliant creative genius at yours. And the tweak between healthy and not healthy is seeing yourself as the brilliant creative genius at your unique skill set. So like the dead end with Moon in Virgo, and these again are some of the signposts to watch for, as far as like all of this is just to help us be aware and understand what's going on inside of us. So some dead ends, like the signposts that are pointing towards like this is not going anywhere constructive, is being overly hard on yourself, which basically leads to losing faith in yourself. Like, I can't do this, which leads to giving up on yourself. And once you've given up on yourself, again, that's where physical health issues manifest, where you give up on, I can't do this. And that is where deterioration comes from. I was having a conversation this morning where like deterioration doesn't come from aging. That's no more so than most people believe that it does. But if you don't buy into that, if you like keep trying and keep going and keep building yourself and keep doing what your heart and soul is calling you to do, deterioration is not a factor in that. Deterioration is you being separated from yourself. And when you give up on yourself, when you stop trying to get better, and a lot of that, again, goes back to that ego piece of needing to be perfect already, that stops us from being able to improve into the state where we could actually have faith and pride in ourselves. Yeah, that chronic dissatisfaction is a hallmark of being in that lower frequency of Virgo. So all things to just keep in mind as we as we go forward into this next week with Virgo energy, because there's so much potential for moving into the next level of our healing journey, which basically is to say moving into the next level of accepting ourselves on an even more radical level, aka warts and all. Oh, I'm grateful that you're here to be listening to me. Seriously, these notes that, 4 hours ago Carly made, she was like, oh, she really made it easy on poor me, who's, like, not poor me. That's see, this is, I don't want to digress into that because it'll just totally unravel, and we're getting there. We're totally getting there. But I did want to share one more thing that I happened to come across this last week, and it was from Dr. K. Maddie. It's one of his most recent videos, and the channel is Healthy Gamer GG, and I believe the video is called How to Build Self-Esteem. And talk about abundance. Talk about an abundant manifestation was that video. Holy crap, can't recommend it enough. But anyways, so he talked about like this sense of identity, and really he's talking about depression and kind of like, in terms of how do you build self-esteem, he starts in a place of what breaks apart your self-esteem, what takes away your self-esteem. And oh, you guys. And so he talks about how when we're very first born, we are basically programmed to download everything out of our environment, and that is very much a survival tactic. And so depending on how your parents or anything in those early formative years, how that was, that's what you downloaded. And if your parents gave you, or AKA like reflected to you, a healthy sense of your own separate self, that like you are your own sovereign being, that you are empowered, you get to decide things for yourself. If they gave you that, then chances are you have a pretty decently formed identity. And maybe even if they didn't give you that, some people just have a really strong sense of identity, that they know who they are. And other people, they had reflections that said things like, he uses the example of grades and your parents. Like, let's say your parents were really hard on you if you didn't get good enough grades, or they told you like, if you're smart, then you'll have a 4.0, or, and he says like, how many people do you know who are smart that don't have a 4.0? Probably lots. How many people that you know who aren't smart who have a 4.0? Probably lots. The outcome isn't as tied to your identity. It's not as equivalent as like, if a 4.0, then you're smart. Like, it's not as equal as that would make it sound. But a lot of us grew up with things like that being told to us. So if you did that, like if you had that experience as a child where your parents told you things like that your worth and your value depend on what kinds of outcomes you're able to achieve in the outer world, then you have this, basically how he described it was like you've internalized expectations from the external world. So you took your parent telling you that, like, if you're a good kid, you'll get good grades. And you internalize that to mean that I'm only good if I get good grades. And the reason that I talk about this, and the reason that I think it fits with Virgo, is because these internalized expectations, I think, can fuel this perfectionism loop that we can get caught in, which is the Virgo shadow. Is you are trying to make the physical world be as perfect as you can see it in your brain, in your mind's eye. And when you're operating like that, when you're operating from a place of internalized expectations from the outer world, you basically feel like, I'm supposed to be like this. I'm supposed to be this thing. And then the Virgo process, where you're comparing, here's what I should be, here's perfect, compared to here's what I really am. And that that process, like that's so Virgo, like comparing who I should be compared to who I really am. And like, how does that work on the Virgo astrology side? And then this on the psychology side of like, how does that actually get to be a thing? We internalize these expectations from our childhood. So thank you, Maddie. She put the video there in the chat, how to build your self-esteem. And so he talks about how if you are depressed, chances are, like basically you're doing the Virgo thing where you are looking at who you should be and you're never measuring up to that. You know, you've internalized these expectations such that you have to be 18 feet tall and 500 pounds, metaphorically speaking, and you're just you. You're never going to be that. And there is this, I mean, it can last however long it lasts, but that's essentially the root of depression, is that you're living in this gap and you're not happy about it. So the highest frequency of Virgo, radical self-acceptance of exactly where you are, usually by humbling yourself to becoming a student, to dropping to a beginner level, if that's where you're starting from. And he talks about like literally untangling these externalized expectation, or no, untangling these internalized external expectations from who you really are, from like who is your real identity, not who were you trained that you should be. And so again, I think we're very much in Virgo territory of like, when you set your ego aside and you listen to your heart, you listen to that call that's asking you to be of divine service. Who is that person? Why do they want to be of divine service? Like, who is this? Because that's love. There's nothing but divine love coming through the highest frequencies of Virgo, both for yourself and for the collective overall. That's why you provide your divine service, because you love the collective. So again, this is something that we all have. This is a spectrum. All the signs have their own spectrum of shadow and light. And this Virgo spectrum, we can get really hung up in these internalized expectations that we picked up from the world around us of who we should be. We can have our own ideas of perfection based on the ability to sense the future potential that's possible. And all the while, there's this invitation, this opportunity within any of it to either beat up on yourself because you're not there yet, or accept yourself because at least you're moving in the right direction with your whole heart. So all of it, just an invitation. Yes. Yeah. That was so helpful, that video, the how to build your self-esteem. Highly recommend. Okay. So that's the full moon in Virgo. Holy moly, we really went into that one. And now we're going to look at Mercury in Pisces. And this is really fun because the ruler of Virgo is Mercury. So to start, we are going to kind of stay in this Virgo territory. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we're going to stay in this Virgo territory and talk about how the Mercury action archetype is related to this Virgo archetype, how they work together, because Mercury also rules Gemini. And so we're going to get into just a little bit how basically Mercury has two faces. They have Mercury has a Gemini face and Mercury has a Virgo face. Yeah. So all of that. So Mercury deals with, or Mercury rules Virgo because of this teacher-student relationship. There's this passing along of knowledge, and on the student's end, a receiving and a learning and an integrating and a downloading of the knowledge. So that is very mercurial. Also, that process that transforms the student into the teacher, that happens through Mercury, through the actions of Mercury. Some keywords that he gives, that these are all very much related to Mercury and the Virgo face of Mercury. So ideas, lectures, pushing our intellect, language, understanding, reading, concentration, learning, burning the midnight oil, and critical thinking. So those are all Mercury pieces of the Mercury archetype. So when it comes to Mercury, there are two different styles of Mercury, two different faces, the Gemini face and the Virgo face. The Gemini face is a questioning face. So Gemini has questions. Gemini probably is going to cut you off mid-sentence with their question. It's burning, it's aching inside of them. Virgo would never do that. Virgo Mercury would listen and listen and listen and listen and listen and listen and listen. And he talked about the difference. There's room for all of it. There's no right or wrong. There's, whichever one you are, that's the one you meant to be. But with Gemini Mercury, there's a lot of reinventing the wheel type things because you're not taking in the teacher's knowledge first. You're jumping to your question, you're jumping to your idea. So there's a lot more proactive, you reinventing the wheel yourself. And so within that, kind of twofold. One, there can be some wasted effort because you're doing things that have already been done. But two, you may learn things and you may come up with a completely radical new invention that has never been conceived of before because you're bringing a fresh set of eyes to the task. You're not allowing yourself to be contaminated with anybody else's version of the story. You're coming to it completely organically. So there's room for innovation inside of that. But at the same time, the Virgo face, the listening face of Mercury, is basically the side that submits to the teacher. And like we talked about, there's a humility in that. There's a setting aside of your ego and listening to what they have to say. And there, I must have made that note somewhere else, but there's a piece to that that is very important and cannot be overlooked as far as like the Virgo face of submitting to the teacher. The first step of doing that is that Virgo has to resonate on a heart level with their teacher. So it can't just be any teacher. Like unless you find one that your heart says yes, and like your heart basically does the opening all by itself, that's your teacher. And if you find a teacher like that to where, oh my gosh, I just want to like open up and take in everything they say ever, great, do that until it stops working, until you feel full. Like, okay, so I got a lot. Like, it reminds me of my professor in grad school. He was a brilliant man and so full of ideas, and I don't know what sign his Mercury was in, but oh my god, goodness, like I could listen to him for hours and days, and I did. I worked with him for 2.5 years, and I would sit in his office and we would have like 4-hour conversations on the regular. And when I say conversation, I mostly mean him on a whiteboard with a marker and me listening. And no note taking, usually just listening. And so I downloaded so much, so much, an overwhelming amount of his knowledge in 2.5 years. And I felt like I processed that knowledge for years and years. I would have these epiphanies of like, oh my gosh, that's what he was talking about. Like, and so the teacher passed his knowledge to me, and it took me so long to work through it, even after the 2.5 years that I spent with him. So I finally, eventually, it was like 7 years later, I wrote him a letter that thanked him for everything because I wanted to reach out to him so many times and tell him things about like, wow, like, what you taught me about this, like I saw it in my real life and like at my job or whatever. And I wanted to tell him that, but I felt like there's still so much more that I need to process that he taught me. And so, yeah, it was like 7 years later, I finally wrote that letter to thank him for being the best teacher I'd ever had. The amount of time that he invested into telling me things. And like, I know now for myself that when you spend time with a one-on-one person, like it is such a compliment, such a investment. And like, here I am, just one of his students, and he is spending hours with me multiple times a week to teach me things. And what an honor, what a humbling honor. And so again, all very Virgo. But that's where the Mercury side comes into the teacher-student relationship and ruling Virgo and all of that. So yeah, I think I already covered that part. So Mercury in general, when we think about like what is Mercury when you look at it like in your own natal chart? It is often referred to as the planet of communication. Like that's kind of the one word association that you give to Mercury. And that's not wrong, but any one word on these archetypes is obviously going to not do it justice. So the thing about communication is that a lot of people, when you say communication, you immediately think talking. And actually, the first step to communication is listening. So when we look at Mercury, yes, it does tell us and point us and guide us about how you're likely to communicate, your style of vocalizing whatever's going on inside of you and communicating, expressing that to the outside world. I think a big snow chunk just melted and fell off my roof. That always freaks me out. Anyways, let's see, what was I saying? So yes, it tells us how you're likely to vocalize, but more than that, way more than that, it tells us how you're wired to perceive, how you're wired to pay attention. And that goes through like which sign, which house, what aspects are touching and talking to your Mercury. It's like that whole picture tells us how are you wired to pay attention. And so he gave just some very brief examples. I'll give you a few of them. So like Aries, if your Mercury's in Aries, for example, you pay attention through the lens of competition. If your if your Mercury's in Capricorn, you are paying attention through the lens of discipline and like how can you personally take responsibility for what's going on in front of you. If you have your Mercury in Scorpio, you look through the lens of suspicion. You believe that like nothing that you ever see on the surface is the whole truth, and so there must be more to it, and because you see the world like that, you dig for that and you find that. So again, the way our Mercury is situated in our chart, one, it is exactly what we meant for it to be, right? The things that we're wired to pay attention to, they give us the pieces. We collect the right pieces along the way so that we can do the work that we came here to do. So yeah, like there's no wrong Mercury. That's the takeaway on that point. And then I want to talk about Pisces. So before we combine Mercury and Pisces, what is Pisces? So when we talk about Mercury is like how you're paying attention, what you're wired to pay attention to. So when we have Mercury come through the sign of Pisces, you're paying attention like Pisces energy. So what is that? One word that describes Pisces is transcendence. So Pisces is part of the water family. So Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces are the three water signs. And water energy is about healing and feeling, and then healing. And Pisces, as part of that healing journey, is the transcendence. It's the releasing, the forgiveness, the letting go, the leaving behind the heaviness and reemerging with spirit who knows in their core that all is well. There's zero doubt in spirit that all is well. And in Pisces, in the highest frequency of Pisces, we remerge with spirit, which means we transcend the difficulties, the heaviness, the challenges of the earth realm. So like if you think about Pisces and Virgo, Pisces is where we completely melt back into spirit, aka leave the earth realm behind. And Virgo is the exact opposite, where we have such a clear, detailed view of exactly what is in the earth realm, warts and all. So you can see how these sister signs, like they really balance each other out. So like if you're in your Virgo, really critical, very unhappy in that gap that like, you know where you are and you can see where you want to be and you're not there yet and you're miserable inside that gap, developing your Pisces energy can really help because in the Pisces energy, we forgive ourselves, we accept fully what is in front of us, and we transcend the minutia of this human experience because we're back looking at that bigger picture that source, spirit, God, universe is looking at. So Pisces also represents enlightenment, also known as Christ consciousness, divine love, universal love. Um, Pisces energy is where we are able to embody spirit in human form. And similar to Virgo, this requires that the ego of the person be set completely to the side. That is the only way that the divine can enter us, is if we aren't blocking our vessel with our ego. And that means when you have your ego set aside, the ego is there to protect us, right? Like, it's never about letting go of our ego or overcoming our ego or like snuffing out our ego, getting rid of that guy. Like, no, like, we need him. There's a lot of protection that exists inside of our ego, and that's healthy. And so that's a side of Pisces where, like, part of that Pisces energy, that openness to the divine, where you have to set your ego to the side to be able to receive this. If you take that openness and you take it out into the physical world with most people, you will wind up hurt. You will wind up deeply hurt. Your feelings, your emotions, it'll bring up all your triggered shit. Like, we're not meant to be that open all the time. That's why Pisces is only one of the 12 zodiac signs, but it absolutely has its place. And especially as we have the personal planets, the sun, Mercury, moon, Venus, Mars, go through Pisces, this is a season of opening up to enlightenment and Christ consciousness and universal love, and like actually feeling that inside of our vessel, not just talking about it, not just thinking about it, not just saying, I want to feel unconditional love, but to actually embody it and to own it for ourselves. That's what our opportunity is in this Pisces season. So because your ego gets set aside, that allows you to soak up this huge amount of energy. And that is where that highly sensitive side of Pisces comes from. And again, if you don't know how to close your energetic boundaries back off and you take that openness out into the world, that's where you can easily become overstimulated with too much input, too much energy, too many other people putting things into you. You're soaking it all up. And that leads to overwhelm or burnout and gives way to the Pisces shadow of escapism. That, like, you're only escaping, like, through the Pisces shadow, like, you only want to escape because you're overstimulated, and you're overstimulated because your boundaries are wide open. So, like, there's a lot of different ways to kind of come at this, as far as like, if you recognize that you're engaging regularly in numbing behaviors, like you're drinking every day, or you're, whatever it is that you're doing, that I'm doing this to numb myself. It's not about giving up the numbing behavior. It's more about recognizing, like, how can I adjust my energetic boundaries so that I'm not overstimulated all the time? How can I take better care of myself? Again, this is where we're on that Pisces Virgo axis of health. If Pisces, on the Pisces end, like, back up a step, on the Virgo end, you want to be of service, go, 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 be of service all the time. Everybody needs help. There's so many people that you can be of service to in this life, that if you wait until you get to the end of the line, like, you don't survive that. You burn out way before that ever happens. And on the Pisces side, there's this like openness and merging with the divine and really enjoying that feeling. Like, it's very nice. And there, I can see why, like, especially if you're in that on a regular basis and you like it in there, why naturally you don't know how to close it. You don't know how to come back out of that Pisces sensitivity as you move back out into the world. And no, Nuggy, can't come up. So that sensitivity leads to numbing, because the sensitivity can be really intense. But the fuel, the evolutionary rocket fuel, as Stephen Forrest calls it, of Pisces, is to do with the depth that they're capable of. So, like, the more you swim downwards, the brighter your energy glows, the brighter your being is. And that, Maggie, go on. She wanted to come and get in the lap. It has been, over 2 hours since she's got to sit in the lap, so I can see why she'd be sad about that. Let's see. I do like how he says in Pisces, like, first step to really getting to those higher Pisces realms of transcendence and enlightenment is to accept and embrace your sensitivity. And that is something that I feel like for myself has been a lifelong endeavor. I was told when I was small that I was too sensitive, or that I should grow a thicker skin, or whatever it was, like, just let it roll off your back or whatever. And well-meaning people who thought that yes, life would be easier if I could do those things, but that's not how I'm built. I am very sensitive. I do take things very personally. I feel things very deeply. And it's like, when it comes to that sensitivity, especially if you're catching yourself numbing it, it's like you can feel like this sensitivity is a burden. You can feel like I'm a victim of my sensitivity, of these crazy, irrational emotions that come over me for no reason, and keep me out of my logical thinking, and I can't function at work the way I want because I'm all up in my emotions. Like, you can get really mad at yourself for being stuck in that sensitivity. And what he's saying is that the first step to getting like into the truly transcendent place of Pisces is embracing that sensitivity, which I feel like that's such a profound connection, synchronicity for me right now, because a few days ago, I listened to a podcast on, Maddie, the channel is called Sounds True. And I think it was the podcast that just came out this week by Mara Bishop called, or I put it in the community page also, this podcast episode. And it was called Shining Bright Without Burning Out. And it's in the podcast episode, it's like an hour and a half conversation where they talk about it, but really they're talking about a audio series that she put together that I went ahead and bought on Audible. It was like one credit, so $14.99 for this 8-part series. And it is all about establishing good energetic boundaries, in both like preparing for your day. Like, she talks about like reading the energetic weather. Like, where are you going? Are you going to stay home all day? Do you have to go to work? Are you going to see your difficult parent? Are you going to go to a concert? You're going to be in a big crowd. Like, what is the energetic weather of your day? And then you prepare as best you can, meaning not protect yourself. She draws a really clear distinction, which I love, between protecting yourself and filling yourself with light, so that you aren't soaking up other people's energy because you're so full of your own light. So she is not a fan, as nor am I, of like protection and thinking about it in that way, because when we protect ourselves, we are coming from a defensive place, and investing our energy in how do we protect ourselves is breeding more fear. It's feeding into that versus accepting what's going on, like that divine acceptance of no matter what happens, it's serving the highest good of all. So lots of ways to be overwhelmed in your Pisces sensitivity. And basically, like, when you embrace that sensitivity and like get to those higher frequencies of Pisces, it's all about acceptance. And like, source energy knows that well-being is dominant. Source energy knows that even when there are horrible things happening on the planet, all is still well. Like, well-being is still dominant. And merging with that, it's such a break from being human. I can see why people get stuck in there. You just don't want to come back out. So speaking of stuck, so this is as far as Pisces, like, the goal is to swim as deep as you can, right? So in this human world that we live in, Stephen Forrest talks about how one of the places where Pisces energy gets stuck is basically being hypnotized by other fish, by the other fish who are swimming around in the shallow waters doing what they're doing, and you're paying attention to what they're doing. And while you're doing that, you're not swimming deeper. You're distracted by the fish who are at surface level. And so you can stay at surface level for a while until you figure out, oh, like, maybe they're not going to swim deeper, but I sure as shit am going to swim deeper. So that's something that we come to on our own. Yeah, that basically you can be entranced and overwhelmed with the noise of life. And that's where a lot of solitude and meditation and quiet and getting away from the noise of the world is somewhat required to like really be successful with Pisces energy. Is you have to get yourself out of the 3D, and the 3D, sex, death, power, money, can be very alluring, But as far as Pisces energy and the evolutionary power of Pisces energy, it does not exist in the 3D where you're entangled in the noise of the world. So yeah, they draw their energy from the depth of your dive in the moment. So staying up at the surface with the other fish, like it just isn't going to cut it. So how do you start to dive? One way is finding humor in and around human drama. Say that one more time. Finding humor around or in the human drama. And that's not to say that like life is a joke or suffering is a joke, because it's not, but it is saying that you're somewhat detaching from the 3D perspective and taking on more of a source energy perspective, where you know that the little bumps in the road along the way aren't as derailing as they may look in the 3D. Maybe, in the bigger picture, grander scheme of things, sometimes things have to fall apart for other things to be born. I think about this a lot because sometimes things have to close down or fail, quote unquote, in order for other new things that are meant to come to life on the planet for them to be born. So like, there's a just a little story, little digression. So I am currently living in Kansas. I moved back here almost 6 years ago from Texas. Nuggy, hey, no, you scratch on that. And I only did that because a couple years before, there was a Walmart in our town, a smaller Walmart, and they opened a Walmart supercenter. There you go. And because they opened the Walmart supercenter, the smaller grocery store decided right before they opened the Walmart supercenter, they decided to close proactively because they knew that, like with the new Walmart supercenter, the town is not going to sustain all three of these grocery stores. So they closed down proactively. 6 months after the Walmart supercenter closed down, the other grocery store basically failed. And so then the town only had a Walmart supercenter. And because of that, I then had this space to come back to my hometown. We bought the empty grocery store building and remodeled it, designed a whole grocery store and installed it and opened it. That was almost 5 years ago. And that journey that I took was only possible because two other business owners decided that we have to quit. We have to give up on this. We have to, this is a failure or whatever. So like, I guess I'm just trying to point out, in the grand scheme of things, like even things that look on the surface like a failure, maybe it still is in the highest good of the all, that thing fails so the next new thing can be born. So there's an acceptance in higher frequencies of Pisces that let us have humor about the human drama that exists on our planet. And in order to dive deeper, we have to accept that there are things that are not the way that we want them to be, and that's okay. That's part of this physical world. So that's where, like in those higher frequencies of Pisces, to access those, you have to learn how to do forgiveness. You have to learn how to truly let go of your grievances and accept what is. And he also says, like, basically that you learn how to smile at the world like you would smile at a child, like hopefully without expectation, without feeling like the child is failing. The child is having a learning moment. The child is, finding its way in the world. They're learning what doesn't work so that they can learn what does work. When you look at your child, when you look at, a toddler who's just getting up to walk for the first time and they fall down, like you wouldn't be mad at them. You wouldn't catastrophize and say, this means they're never going to walk again. They're never going to walk in their life. Oh my gosh, they're never going to do this. I mean, no, you would say they're going to have to learn it. They're going to have to practice it. They're getting better and better and better. Like, hopefully that's the story you would be telling about your child. So it's like looking at the world and cultivating a story like that says it's better than it's ever been. It's getting better every day. More and more people are finding more and more acceptance and forgiveness. And we are, as a collective, moving in the right direction. Is it ever going to be perfect on Earth? No, it's not. And so we have to accept it. If you're going to get to the transcendence levels of Pisces, you have to accept imperfection. This was an interesting one because I feel like I get trapped in this one a lot personally, where this is another way that Pisces energy can get stuck, is that, let's say you start because you're stuck on the surface with where most of the fish are. And then you figure out like, oh no, I want to dive deeper. I don't want to just stay up here. So you dive down a little ways and now you're at this new depth. And he says, like, as you go deeper, the fish get bigger and there are fewer of them. So you go a little deeper and now there's this whole new place where now you have different insight because you have different vantage point. And he says this is another way that Pisces can get trapped, is in that psychological insight, because you swum down 10 feet and now you have insight, and the temptation can be, oh my gosh, look at this insight. And you rush back to the surface and look at all this and great. And that's wonderful. But like, the insight that you're getting at 10 feet isn't the point. Like, don't get stuck at that insight. Keep going. Like, don't come out just because you have a realization. Keep diving. Go deeper. Don't let the realization be like the end all be all. Like, oh, okay, I got what I came for. No, like, pass through the realization and go even deeper into it. I was like, because I'm constantly like, I'll meditate or whatever. And like, I set my timer for 15 minutes and like a few minutes in, I have this awesome idea that I want to journal about it, or I want to make this video, and I'll like pop out of my meditation and go back into the physical and like act it all out and do all the things. And he's like, no, like, don't let, that's a temptation that's easy to fall for. You come across a new realization and you think, oh great, I got what I came for, but like, keep swimming, go a little deeper. Okay, and last but not least, the Mercury in Pisces page. So this is Mercury, what we pay attention to, and Pisces, this place where the human realm blends back into the physical realm. Sorry, the spiritual realm. The physical and the spiritual, they combine. So like if you look at Pisces and Virgo, Pisces being the spiritual, Virgo being the physical, that connection of the spirit and the body, that's that axis. So how does Mercury pay attention and communicate while going through the sign of Pisces? So in order for Mercury and Pisces to be mentally engaged, you're looking to cultivate non-ordinary states of perception. So he's like, let's say all of like you turn on the light in your pantry and you pull the light switch and the light bulb takes a minute to come on, and you're just standing there looking at the light bulb while you're waiting for it to come on. And in that moment of looking at this and clear mind, you have this epiphany drop in that is like, oh my gosh, you understand life now because of this analogy that you came up with while you're waiting for the light bulb to turn on. So like, that's the brilliance of Mercury and Pisces, is that the wisdom and the understanding that you can download through this Mercury and Pisces transit is huge. But as we're going to talk about, like, you're looking for non-ordinary states of perception, and they don't exist in the physical world mostly. Like, you can't be talking to someone else or listening to someone else effectively and be finding these non-ordinary states of perception. So that's where, again, like solitude, carving out some alone time to where you can be in your own quiet and let your thinking brain take a fiver and let your mind be empty, which will allow these divine insights to come in and download. That Mercury in Pisces gives you a cognitive rapport with your own soul. And like, think about that. Like, he talks in one of them, I think this was back in the Moon chapter, where he talks about, like, he had an example where you burst into tears and you're confused why you're crying. And I'm like, hey, that happened to me. Like, I have that experience. And I remember that. And I remember thinking, like, what the fuck is going on? Like, where did this come from? Why am I crying? And then he goes on to say, he's like, yeah, imagine being so disconnected from your own soul that your own emotions surprise you. I was like, Stephen Forrest, you just called me out big time. So Mercury in Pisces gives you a cognitive rapport with your soul, meaning your emotions really aren't going to surprise you, meaning your emotions are much closer to the surface than they normally are, meaning you have this openness, this like mental awareness of your soul, how it feels, what it wants, what it's asking for. So that's why like this is so exciting, this big, by the time we get to the Virgo full moon, Mercury will be conjunct Jupiter, and both of them will be opposite the Virgo full moon. So that's where this big, new, inventive, creative thinking, like we have this potential for our thinking monkey brain that can like be like a hamster on a wheel sometimes in our brain, just going around and around. Like that is not where we are right now. Mercury in Pisces kind of like suspends all of that and creates this space for your soul to inhabit your brain. And that's pretty different, from how all other 11 signs operate with Mercury. Pisces is by far very unique in how Mercury functions in Pisces. But like I said before, like there's no wrong state for Mercury to be in, even though Pisces is technically where Mercury is in detriment and in fall, which is like two different ways of saying it can't function very well. And I don't resonate with that so much as like it functions very differently. And as far as like good functioning or not good functioning, that's a societal construct as far as like how we have defined how you need to function to be doing a good job or a bad job. That goes back to those internalized expectations from the external world that says like, unless you can vocalize like this, then we don't think you're smart. And that's just not real. And so that's where Mercury in Pisces, like it operates on a completely different wavelength than most other people. So there is a potential for being misunderstood because one of those, so like Mercury in Pisces, whether you have this in your natal chart or you're just experiencing it with the collective for like these next few weeks, it's giving you a direct cognitive experience, meaning like you are aware of it in your brain, of the framework of consciousness. Like, how does consciousness actually work? What is your soul compared to your ego? Like for me, these last like, I don't know, week or two, I feel like that's what's helping me to accept myself better is that I'm so clear on my soul, like the volume knob on my soul has been turned up such that it's now like just as loud, if not louder than my ego. And they say different things a lot of the times. They have different stories that they tell me. And usually my ego's story is really, really loud and dominant. And my soul's story is down here somewhere where I can go look for it and find it if I want to, but it's not front and center. And now I feel like it is front and center. It's like, that's Pisces. That's the personal planets going through Pisces, is that our ego steps to the side and our soul is more available to us. And like, how cool is that? We empty our thinking mind so that something transcendent may enter our being. We listen for those teachers who speak to our hearts. We trust our intuition to discern. We don't need to come to a logical conclusion about who the best teacher for us is. It'll be something that our heart just says yes. Like it'll be something where you'll be searching on Audible to see if this person has any audiobooks or what are their other YouTube videos, or like you will go in search of hearing more from them. It's not ever going to be a matter of like being like, hear ye, I declare this person is my new teacher. The demand for their knowledge will speak for itself. If it's something that it's like a hell yes, like you won't be able to help yourself. You'll have to go learn from them. This is also a time as the personal planets come through Pisces to celebrate our creative imagination. So especially like we said on the Virgo full moon, where, what is your service to the collective? This is a time to get really, really imaginative, like Nostradamus creating something that wasn't valuable for 500 years. Like get really creative. Like there is no such thing as like too big outside the box. Like basically anything that we can dream of, we can create in this physical world. The vision is so the first step. And all these personal planets moving through Pisces, like this feels like the dark side of the moon, almost like the culmination of what is it that we want to contribute to this place? Like, why are we here? Why did our soul come here? What's the divine service that we came to offer? And once we're clear on that, once we know that, all the personal planets move on into Aries, where we stand up in the world and we assert, here I am, and here's what I'm about, and here's what I like about myself, and here's what I'm doing, and this is the flag I'm planting, and this is what I'm going to do. There's all this self-assertion, and self-assertion of what? So much of that self we find in Pisces when we dive into the depths of our own consciousness, and we discover, like, if you sink deep enough into your psyche, that really all that's down there is love, universal, divine, unconditional love. So when you think about your divine service, it's full of unconditional love. So this is that season of having a cognitive experience, having an embodied experience of your own soul's unconditional love, not only for yourself, but for the highest good of all. And the clearer we can be, the less judgmental we are of ourselves to perform like we normally do, and just accept that this is a season for being quiet and going inward and imagining and dreaming and surrendering to, like, the soul mission that we came with in the first place, that we will get a lot out of this season, that it will plant a lot of seeds, um, that as we move forward through, like, the Pisces is the 12th zodiac sign. So, like, over this last year, we have lived out the last time we were in Pisces, all the personal planets went through Pisces. And we took that understanding of ourself and we went through the evolution of Aries, Taurus, Gemini. We went around the circle, and now we've learned all of that. We've gathered back up all of these new insights and new understandings. And now we come back into this Pisces season to dive even deeper into who we really are. And as we gather up a deeper sense of who we are, we take that in and we go around the wheel again. When we get into, I think it's when the sun enters Aries, is the astrological new year. And that's happening, I believe, March 20th, which would also be the spring solstice, I think, is a thing. I don't know. Nope. Let's see. Is that a thing? I had my page pulled up. Spring equinox, there you go, is on March 20th. That's when the sun enters Aries. Well, it says that's on March 21st. Anyways, right after the Virgo full moon. So again, I love how the cycle just continues, because everything that comes out of these manifestations of a greater awareness of our own divine service on this planet, we take all that, March 18th, it culminates on the full moon. And then a couple days later, we move into Aries with the astrological new year. We take all of that new understanding and we put it into action. We move into that fire sign, that spark, that raw spark of life, which is Aries. And we do something with it. We make it happen in the physical world, which is why we're here, why we're physical. We're not meant to stay in the transcendent Pisces arena for 24/7 our whole lives. Depending on your chart, you're meant to spend more time there than others. But ultimately, we go exploring in that realm, and then we bring it back and we move it through the entire cycle, where we actually turn it into something physical. Mercury in Pisces is a lot more likely to speak in an intuitive interpretation kind of way, whether that is through metaphor or poetry or even dance, like doing an interpretive dance, selecting the song that communicates your feeling, and then allowing that song to animate your body. Like, that can be a message in and of itself, the way that you communicate your feelings. So Mercury in Pisces, it's not wrong, but it is very different in terms of how it expresses what goes on the inside. And I think the biggest reason for that is that, like, what we're talking about is an infinite understanding. Like, when we start saying that you're having a cognitive experience of your soul is infinite. Your soul doesn't even fully fit inside this vessel. When you reconnect with your higher self, those roots trace back to source energy. Every single one of us, our roots trace back to source energy. So when you get back to the root of each one of us, we're all the same. We're all one. So that Pisces transcendent place, like, it is so easy and so full of love. And you look at every other being on the planet and it's basically you. And like, there's this understanding of the interconnectedness of all things. And that's why, like, when you really get to the heart of Like, one of the pushbacks that I hear on self-care is that it's selfish, and that, especially Pisces Virgo axis, that's an axis that like you have to figure out self-care. You have to, because otherwise you'll burn yourself out over and over and over again until you have a chronic illness. That's like, I've seen it on so many people's charts. So it's about figuring out like, how can I take such good care of myself that I cultivate this energy that, like, when you really get into divine service, it is always full of unconditional love. So if you put yourself first, if you take such good care of yourself that it gives you this energy to give away, like, loving yourself is only creating more love for you to give to everybody else that you ever come into contact with. So another piece of like why Mercury and Pisces can manifest on the surface differently from what other Mercury placements look like. So like Mercury is how we're wired to pay attention, like what you're wired to pick up on from your environment. And Pisces is that place where you go back across the veil from the physical to the spiritual, from the physical to the energetic. And in that energetic side, it's infinite. And so there's one, like, how would you ever take something that's infinite and put it into something that's so impossibly finite, like words slash language? That's why I'm saying like interpretive dance may be your best bet as far as communicating Mercury and Pisces things. But the other thing, like when we talk about Mercury, is listening, and Mercury and Pisces can kind of get a bad rap sometimes for maybe not being the best listeners. But that also is a societal construct, because listening to what? Like when somebody tells you that you're a bad listener, they mean that you're not listening to them, right? And Mercury in Pisces is listening to something. You're listening to your soul. You're listening for messages from your higher self. You're listening to this like ambient psychic energy that just floats around all of us all the time. And people with heavy Pisces energy are very sensitive to that ambient energy that's always present. So when Mercury's in Pisces, you're listening to spirit. You're not listening to the human person in front of you talking. Maybe you try, and then they say something that inspires you or reminds you of something, and now you're off down the rabbit hole in your brain. And that's, it's not that you're not listening to them or that you don't want to. It's that what's more dominant is your internal world, is your connection with your higher self. Nice kitty. So, your dominant perception is your messages from your higher self or your soul self. And in the extreme, again, Mercury and Pisces can get misunderstood, because in the extreme, you can get so consumed into your inner world, because that's your Mercury, that's where you're meant to be paying attention, that you legit lose connection with let me read this, the common version of reality. Yeah. So like Mercury and Pisces maybe gets told like you're an airhead, or you have your head in the clouds, or like whatever it is, you're not realistic, you're a dreamer, or not practical, or whatever. And again, who says you have to be? Like, for those of us that don't have Mercury and Pisces in our natal chart normally, we are experiencing these next few weeks, and we have this window opening to us. We have this opportunity to allow our thinking mind to take a hiatus, and for our brains to be more empty than normal and let something truly divine come through us. We have that opportunity. If you have Mercury and Pisces in your natal chart all the time, anybody who's telling you you're doing it wrong, they just don't know. Like, Mercury and Pisces in your natal chart, Mercury in the 12th house in your natal chart would present a lot the same. It's like your number one receptor is pointed inward toward your soul. So yeah, I think it's like every single version of Mercury, though, has what it's wired to pay attention to and what it can't pay attention to because it's wired to pay attention to this. So that's this no matter what sign Mercury is in. And I think Mercury in Pisces pushes the envelope as far as like what is acceptable human behavior. Like are you allowed to daydream in the middle of a conversation? Not usually. And right now, should you be allowed to? Yes. All the time, should you be allowed to? Maybe. So yeah, it's about like when we get back into that upper frequencies of Pisces, like self-acceptance, the Virgo end, radical self-acceptance of what is, and how gentle can we be with ourselves? How much can we accept where we are right now compared to who we wish we were or who the perfect version of ourselves is in our mind? Another shadow of Pisces energy, so this would be true of any Pisces planet, is that basically you're rising above everything. That's like the idea of transcendence, is that you're able to forgive and let go and rise above it and re-merge with spirit and to feel that wholeness and that connection. And that's the idea. But it is possible to abuse transcendence, is how he put it. And I would imagine that for each person, this is going to look different. We all have a different threshold of like, what we're able to handle. But that if you're rising above everything, you can kind of like start to do that as a disconnect point of like spiritual bypassing, basically, is what he's warning against. Is that if you rise above everything and let go of everything and forgive everything and whatever, and you just like go with this flow all the time, you're somewhat giving up your opportunities for growth that exist in the physical when you do come back down into the Virgo side, into the physical where it isn't perfect and you have to love yourself anyway, right? Like it's almost like the easy way out to constantly be on the Pisces side in your transcendent state, in the state where what's that going to matter in 500 years? It's not. So I don't have to care about it now. Like that's great. And that can be a tool as far as helping you to come up out of the burdens of the everyday human drama and noise that we have on our planet. But spiritual growth, like it happens in the physical as much as it sounds like it's going to happen in the transcendental spiritual state. It's really on the Virgo end where we look at the physical, it's not good enough, and we love it anyway, right? It's easy to let it all go and not let any of it matter and feel good. It's a lot harder to feel good when you look at what's imperfect and you feel good anyway. So that's really like Pisces, Virgo, the health axis that's being illuminated, both with all these personal planets coming through Pisces, the full moon in Virgo. The better we are at accepting ourselves as we are in our right now moment, the healthier beings we are and that we will be. And that, yeah, health is not a factor of age necessarily. It's a factor of how well we're managing the gap between who we are right now and who we want ourselves to be. And are we loving ourselves through that process or denying ourselves love because we're not good enough yet? So it kind of comes back to what we were talking about with the moon, like how do we mother ourselves? Are you nurturing and gentle and loving with yourself and acknowledging that you're trying and you're making progress and you're moving in the right direction? Or are you beating up on yourself because you're not there yet, you're not going fast enough, it's not coming to you fast enough, other people are going faster than you? There's so many different ways that we can get hung up in the self-critical and forget that we actually are never going to reach this perfect picture that we have in our brain. So unless we learn how to do it from the imperfect place, then we never get there. So yeah, yeah. That's the end of my notes. And that's 2 hours and 17 minutes worth. That's a good big bunch. I feel like that's really good. My notes were a lifesaver, holy moly. Which is just really interesting because, I was feeling very overwhelmed by my Pisces energy that I have right now that, is more accessible than normal to all of us with all the planets and everything that we have in Pisces right now. And with any sign, it's true that if you're feeling overwhelmed or like in more of a shadow space with one sign, that grounding into its sister sign can help balance the way that you feel. It can help like build up the weak spots of the other one. So like where Pisces has like an infinite understanding or is capable of an infinite understanding that just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes and it's like infinitely huge. How do you put that into words? That's where I was like, overwhelmed. And it occurred to me, like, make yourself some notes. And that's such a Virgo piece of like, get yourself a physical thing that you can use to like help yourself move through the physical world. You don't have to do it all inside your head, inside your energy. Like use a physical tool. That's such a Virgo solution. So yeah, I thought that was like very interesting. I'm definitely enjoying this axis and working with it myself and in my own energy. I'm seeing some things too around squares. So, like, for example, I have a T square, which just means that, like, my Gemini planets, they square my Virgo energy and my Pisces energy. So that Gemini that's in the middle, it has a square this way and it has a square this way. And squares in general have like got me this whole other rabbit hole because I think about, a square is always going to be within signs of the same modality. So like mutable signs square each other, fixed signs square each other, cardinal signs square each other. And that means that squares exist between masculine and feminine energy. So like Gemini being an air sign is a masculine sign, and Pisces being a water sign is a feminine sign. Gemini or Virgo is also an earth sign. That's also a feminine sign. So no matter which way you go, it's masculine squaring feminine. And that's really interesting. And I've been thinking a lot about masculine and feminine lately for weeks now, actually. And these squares are one more step of that because it's like, why does masculine square feminine? It sounds like the setup of a knock knock joke or something. Like, I don't have the answer per se, but I can tell you, like, in the masculine side, I feel like there is more ego and that's healthy, that like there's a healthy place for ego inside of our masculine energy, and that courage and that bravery and that belief in yourself to assert yourself out into the world and take up space and charge forward. Like there is a very real need for that masculine energy in our life, and it squares the feminine energy because inside that feminine, whether we talk about Pisces or Virgo, for example, there's a taking off of your ego to allow something divine and collective to move through your being. So my Gemini energy has ego and is masculine and has a drive and has an idea of the way that they want the things to be. And then it squares these two feminine energies where in order to be successful with those, you have to take your ego out of the way and just receive. Just let it unfold. Just let it be what it's going to be. And masculine energy is the opposite of that. So it's just like, no real takeaway there per se. But I've definitely been contemplating like Gemini square Pisces mostly, because I feel like that's really what's at odds here for me. That's like throwing me off kilter. Like all this extra Pisces energy in the sky right now is like really pulling me towards the Pisces end. And it's aggravating my masculine. It's aggravating my ego. And so, like I said, it's like the volume knob's been turned up on my soul, and it lets me see more clearly, like who's my soul versus who's my ego versus like where those internalized external expectations that I picked up along my way, like my conditioning or my programming. So yeah. Big things. Such big things. And like Pisces' job is just to like kind of get out of the way enough to be able to be shown this from your higher self. Like there's really nothing to reach for, more like just some self-forgiveness and some gentle touch with yourself while you may not be as capable of being in your masculine energy right now. I feel like that's very much like with all these Pisces planets and then the full moon in Virgo, like the feminine is being accentuated in a big way. And so if you're used to operating on your masculine energies, they're likely less accessible to you right now, which can be frustrating and can lead to beating up on yourself. And basically that goes back to that Virgo space of here's where you are compared to here's where you want to be, and how happy are you in that gap. So yeah, I feel like I'm just kind of like circling the bowl at this point. So I think I'm going to cut it off here. I'm going to end this and call it good for this day. I genuinely appreciate anyone who tunes in, those of you who are here right now and those of you catching the replay later. I've had some epiphanies through doing these forecasts, and so much growth in my own understanding of just from following these transits and these energies and trying to understand it well enough to be able to synthesize an explanation for you all. So thank you so much for taking this in. I love that you are here with me. Check out the channel. There's stuff on there. New videos are still coming every week because I have some scheduled behind the scenes. But I have not made any new videos for the channel lately. Like I said, the grocery project is going ahead of schedule. And as soon as I'm done with that, I'll be back full time working on my YouTube channel. So thank you, thank you, thank you so much. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave those in the comments. And until next time, you take such good care of yourselves, and so will I. Okay, bye.